Hi, it's me again. Hey, so this morning I woke up pretty early and I had an interview with my good friend Ron Braithwaite, and uh, he's an awesome guy. He grew up Quaker and has a very different twist on the way spirituality works. And I hope that you will all enjoy getting to know Ron and the way he looks at the world. All right, here we go. So, good morning, Ron. How are ya?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you. It's nice to see your smiling face.
And I have to say, I love your background.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Oh, that
fantastic.
it's the blood moon that I put inside the eclipse. So I shot the blood moon from the top of Rocky Butte and then with a very long lens, and then shot the eclipse off in Eastern Oregon and then put them inside. It's I like it.
It's lovely.
Yeah,
Well,
makes me look
because
like I have a halo.
it does. And because I like it so much, we are moving you to to speaker view out of gallery view. And
Okay.
you and I go back, God, I'm thinking 90s.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah, festivals.
yeah. Fall Equinox Festival. I'm sure probably Sunfest. You know,
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Nine Houses of Gaia stuff.
Right, right. So I remember many nights around the fire, chatting with you late in the evening and hearing some amazing things about your life and the things that you've done. So I wanted to interview you so that you had an opportunity to tell folks more about these cool things that you are into, such as this awesome photograph behind you. So I sent you the interview questions ahead of time.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and start with introducing yourself and everything you do.
Okay, I'm Ron Braithwaite. This is my 70th year. I'll be 70 in August. Let's see here. I was raised in the Evangelical Friends Church. So the Quakers are, there are two kinds of Quakers. There are the really conservative Quakers and they're the really liberal Quakers. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we have the most conservative Quakers in the world, and we have the most liberal Quakers in the world.
No
I
idea.
was raised in the holiness tradition, which is sort of like, oh, Hasidic Christianity. Okay, so the
Okay.
ultra Orthodox. And when I was born, I was made a member of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. My mother was one of the founders of Vacation Bible School and Child Evangelism Fellowship. My father would preach at the missions in downtown Skid Row missions, and I would play my trombone for them. However, I kept asking unfortunate questions.
Unfortunate questions. I like it.
Yes, yes. One of the early ones was, you know, asking my mother that if everybody who didn't accept Jesus as their savior was going to hell, and that most of the people in the world had never even heard of Jesus, did that mean they all went to hell? And her response was, yes, that's why we send out missionaries. And that didn't make sense to me. So there were a lot that didn't make sense to me. But so professionally, let's see. I should talk about the other areas. I've been logger and setting chokers and chasing and high lines operations up on the side of Mount Adams and Mount St. Helens. Worked in lumber mills, political activist, working on peace and social justice and anti-racism stuff. Got into photography in high school and started working for the local newspaper covering high school at 15. United Press International, I stumbled into and became a UPI stringer when I was 18, covering in the youth scene in the Portland area. So I got a press pass to get into rock festivals and all sorts of stuff. I have a lot of stories from those days.
Right. I'm going to make a note of that one.
Ingested a whole lot of psychedelics in those days. Let's see here. But I kept, because of my background and my dream of getting my father to somehow love me someday, I got sucked back into the Jesus People movement and was at Maranatha Church, which was a primarily Black Pentecostal church. And so I was part of that. And, you know, it didn't last, but, you know, I hoped that he would love me, and he didn't. So, at any rate, later on, I became a research assistant for a PhD candidate in church history and was fascinated by comparative, and still am fascinated by comparative religions. Photographer, let me see, then in the late 70s, somebody brought, I had a commercial photography studio, and somebody brought the very first computer, a personal computer with front panel switches and all this other stuff, and into the studio. I was fascinated, and I ended up making there's a lot of stories there, making the transition from being a photographer to becoming a programmer. And then, you know, software engineer, got to do a whole lot of cool stuff. Because of my activism, I was living down in Southern California, which is where I met Elizabeth. And, you know, we've been married 33 years. And
wow.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
We like each other. And hey, if it wasn't for her, I'd be living in a shopping cart somewhere. Any rate, we got, because of my anti-apartheid work, and, you know, I was at one point chair of the Friends of the ANC in the Frontline States, which was at the time the largest local anti-apartheid group in the US, with lots of ANC folks essentially in exile who were living there. I got invited to teach computer science at the University of Zimbabwe. And so Elizabeth and I went to Zimbabwe in 1980. I got all the computers and configured everything and basically set up the computer lab for the Solomon Mulongo Freedom College in Tanzania, which was the ANC's college in exile. And I got told by one of the college folks that it was that when, you know, that anyway, I don't need to go on that. That's, you know, so these days I'm kind of retired sort of somewhat. And, oh, and I'm a prez of the Bavarian Illuminati Motorcycle Cabal and Conspiracy. Outlaw motorcycle group that is made up of ceremonial magicians, witches, and other heathens and other pagans. So,
yes, some of my favorite people in the world have that patch on the back.
Yeah.
So, okay. You were going to say something?
You know, I can babble on forever, but we only have an hour.
So. Right. So I'm going to go back to that last question and ask, the second question is, what aspect of paganism do you identify with? But there's so much going on with you. I don't know if that's an adequate question to even throw at you.
Well, let me, I mean, I guess I could say Wicca in a general sense. We explored the Druidic traditions through the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, Obad. But that wasn't quite, it didn't quite hit my sweet spot. Okay, so let me preface what I'm going to say, that I speak for myself. I can't speak for anyone else. The most horrible faux pas that I could do is to proselytize and get somebody else to convince someone to believe the same way I do. And I want to get back to that later. That is, so at any rate, in Wicca, the reclaiming community, the reclaiming tradition here in Portland had public, public ritual, and it was, I took to it like a fish to water, and I eventually ended up being on the ritual planning committee. And, then there was, activism clusters, political, using witchcraft and magic for political purposes. And so I organized a couple of cool things, like the Western Republican Leadership Conference was meeting at the Red Lion on Jansen Beach.
Right.
Okay.
Which doesn't exist anymore, really.
But... Which doesn't exist anymore. But we cast, first off, I left letters and envelopes for all of the delegates, telling them the witches were going to do an exorcism to cast out and release them from the thrall of fascism under which they had fallen.
What year was this, Ron?
Well, this was 2001, 2002, 2003, somewhere around. I can't remember. I kept this. This is a Willamette Week, and it has, let me see here. It's in here somewhere. So what's the date on this? I don't remember this.
It's right under their front banner usually.
And 2003, June 16th.
Okay. So in 2003, you're at the Red Lion at Jansen Beach, which
right.
For people who are not from the Portland area, Jansen Beach is this island in between Oregon and Washington, right in the middle of the river, pretty much.
And the reason they chose it was for security reasons.
Really?
Yes, because they knew we were protesting. Remember, these were the days H.W. Bush, W's daddy, labeled Portland Little Beirut. And I have no idea why. I mean, we just held a picnic outside his room, and we invited him to come down and join us for a picnic. We would even provide all the food.
Oh, goodness.
Anyway, so we cast the circle around there, having notified them that we're going to do that. And then Eric Baga, we had just lots of people. We had a nice gathering. And so Eric was a magician, so he bound up Lady Liberty in ropes.
my gosh, I remember
Okay.
seeing that.
Okay. And then we had the Patriot Act.
Right.
Okay. Printed on flash paper. And when we did the spell to release Lady Liberty from the bonds, the Patriot Act went poof, and the ropes fell away. It was, you want psychodrama? That was psychodrama. And
Fantastic.
we had Oregon OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting showed up. We had Lars Larson, who's a really right-wing, foaming at the mouth. It was very rewarding. So anyway,
So let's cycle back around
that
to
was
this.
reclaiming. That was
Okay.
reclaiming, and then, but there were no reclaiming covens open that were open to new members.
Right.
And so got invited to go and sort of check out a new coven from the App Tower tradition. And the App Tower tradition was the, let me see here, come on. It's a family trad.
Oh, okay.
Comes out of the Central Valley. Now, so there's something called British traditional witchcraft. We all think of Gardnerian and, Alexandrian, and, there's a few others. But there's the Central California trad is, although it really expanded in the 60s, where it really came from was at the end of World War I, when soldiers returned with their British wives, and at least one of them was a witch.
Okay.
Okay, and then I guess in the early 60s there was more influx, but there's never been any one person. So in Diffid App Tower, the son of Grandma Julie, was decided to open it up and initiate people who are not part of the family.
Okay.
Okay, and so we grew off of there. And we have some unique features in that tradition that, for instance, we work with the tides, sort of, okay, so it's not just the seasons, there's also the tides.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of beautiful symbols up there. It's, so, at any rate, as sometimes happens, there were issues within the coven that I won't, with the high priestess that I'm not going to get into. And the coven, she released the coven and laid down the coven, whereupon everyone in the coven except her reformed into a new coven.
That typically happens.
Yeah, power trips. I don't, so when we started our new coven, one of the things we agreed on was we were non-hierarchical. I don't want to have power over anybody else. I don't want anybody else to have power over me.
That's so important.
Yeah. So, a lot of times people who are attracted to power, whether it's cops, whether it's high priestesses, whatever it is, are people that probably shouldn't have that power. Not always, not always. And I know some notable exceptions, but it happens all too damn frequently.
And I've noticed that the best leaders are the people who didn't ask for it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The people who just kind of found themselves thrust into the position.
And that is the democratic process. You don't get power by claiming it. You get power by being chosen for it.
It's a servant position, not
It's
a leader position.
yes.
Yeah.
And I should warn you that I tend to you know, quote from the Bible because that is my cultural heritage.
Right.
A lot of it, but I quote from the Bible as a pagan, not as. And I should make clear that I when asked all of these different things, I think the easiest way to describe myself is as a pagan Quaker.
I like it.
Okay. I believe that there is that of the divine within every person. And whether that divine is polytheist or monotheist or collective consciousness, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. What is important is the practice.
Yes. Yes. I have to say that is so true. So we know kind of
one last thing.
I wanted
to refer a couple of books. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So when we formed, we decided we wanted to create, and since Wicca and witchcraft really is continually recreating itself. Yes, there are traditions that go back, there's stuff that go back thousands and thousands of years, but the witchcraft of today is different from the witchcraft of our grandparents' time. Okay,
It is.
It's different from, you know, it continually evolves. And to say that, you know, when Gardner wrote, you know, started working on his stuff and declared the Gardnerian tradition, he was talking about a lineage going way back, but, you know, lineage comes from multiple sources. It isn't one source. And so when we created, we had a couple of guiding things. I discovered a book called The Triumph of the Moon.
Your background is covering it.
Oh no.
Yeah, hold it in front of you. There we go. The Triumph of the Moon
by Ronald Hutton.
Okay. Triumph of the Moon.
He is an Oxford Don, a professor who has specialized and made his long and illustrious career in studying witchcraft. And this, The Triumph of the Moon, gives a really excellent stuff. In you know, I mean, there's drawing down on the moon, which is another important one.
Right.
But that is, The Triumph of the Moon is, to me, I think, one of the most authoritative histories. There's stuff you can quibble with, but I mean, it's really good. The other book that we used, so that gave us some context, historical context.
Okay.
The other book that we used that I cannot recommend more is called The Meaning of Ritual by Deborah Lipp, L-I-P-P. Now, Gardner wrote the book, The Meaning of Witchcraft, which was fundamental. Deborah Lipp's book, The Meaning of Ritual, talks about what are all of the rituals. Now, she was coming from a Gardnerian perspective.
Okay.
But what is the symbolism? Why do we do these things? And when you are creating a new religion from scratch, you're not creating it from a vacuum. And if you just go pick out pieces here and there that you like, they may not fit together.
Right.
And inevitably, what will happen at some point, guaranteed, there is going to be some cognitive dissonance where, oh, you say this over here, but you say this over here, and they're not really compatible with each other. And so when you are in ritual, when you are trying to do magic, and you hit this cognitive dissonance, it can destroy the effectiveness of any spell that you are casting.
Yes, I agree. That's true.
Okay, so anyway, those two books, strongly recommend. Okay.
Cool.
Now I'll shut up and let you ask another question.
Well, I want to circle back around on something you said about proselytizing being a giant no-no in your book.
Yes.
Can you talk more about what you feel possibly proselytizing does and why it's such a negative mark in your book?
Well, okay, so let's talk about who we are. We claim that we are trying to become one with the divine in some way, right?
Right.
However, if we claim that, like Christianity does, and like other, it's omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, that means that by definition, as humans, we can only experience part of it. Okay, it's the 9 blind men encountering an elephant,
right.
The tail is like a rope, the legs are like trees, etc. How we experience the divine is based on our own personal experience. Okay? And that means my experience of the divine is different from your experience of the divine. By definition, it cannot be otherwise. And so when different religions proselytize, they are insisting that you have their experience and that you believe what they believe, and what they believe comes out of their experience of the divine. And if you have a different experience of the divine, it may be like going into Maranatha Church and hearing the choir and the band playing and everyone is dancing in the spirit. And oh my God, it is so powerful. It is so seductive. And then there's the altar call. And you really want to give your heart to Jesus. But that's not your experience. That is your experience of the moment, not your experience of your lifetime. And
yeah.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah.
So one of the differences between paganism and Wicca and so on is that it is the practice, not the belief, that is important. Within the wood sorrel coven of the world tree tradition, we have people who are polytheist and we have people who are monotheist. Okay, who we have it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is the practice, because it is the practice that gives us focus.
Right. Right.
Okay, so anyway, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that does. That fills in that hole there. Um, you know, we're going way off script here, Ron.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just
I warned you
babble
this
on.
would happen. Um, so what I'm looking for now is what I'm wondering is, how do you serve the community now? I mean, I know you as the community archivist, because wherever there's a festival, where there's a gathering of pagans, there's Ron with his camera. And then we all get to see the lovely images when you're done.
Well, that's actually an issue. I have thousands of negatives that I haven't scanned yet, and I really, really, really need to scan them because there's stuff going back to the mid '90s.
Right?
Yeah. So, but what I'm doing right now is we've had a very, very beloved, one of the most beloved elders of our community has passed.
Right.
And I am gathering photos, as I did of his wonderful, lovely wife, and creating a slideshow video. And it's, so people have given me photos, and I have some digital stuff, but I'm getting stacks and stacks. So I'm scanning in these photos. And Peppy is helping me. She's picking out music, and we're going to produce a slideshow and a video. And I've digitized a couple of videos that I have, of VHS tapes that I have gotten over. So the scapegoat is now, it can be viewed.
Oh, that's fantastic.
On my YouTube page.
Okay, I want a link to that at the end.
Okay, you'll get a link to that, and the Susie's up there, and a couple other people's videos are up there, so it's cool. So at any rate, my feeling is I'm a member of this community. I have some talents and some expertise in some areas, but not in others. And it's my job to pay attention, and when I can help, offer my help.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I want to bring it back again to, of course, the purpose of this series is to allow folks to understand that magic and paganism are actually healthy, beneficial ways of walking through the world, healthier and more beneficial than many that are out there. But what I want to know from you is what you think your spiritual practices have done for good or better, better for worse, for your mental health.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's my spiritual. So one of the essential parts is meditation. And, things like a guided meditation can be incredibly powerful. And we have, some friends within the coven who are very good at that. Mm-hmm. I find after I go through one of our guided meditations, it's not just that I'm relieved of stress and all this other stuff. It's that a lot of my mind is opened back up to possibilities. And I am open, and I am more healthy, and I'm more able to receive the divine's love. When it's so easy for us, or for at least for me, I have two competing things. I get really so focused. I have blinders on, and I can't see the broader picture. And the other is, I might just be a little bit ADHD at times. You may have noticed this. Yeah, just, so, I mean, it's great. My curiosity is great, but I discovered that my practice of ritual, even if I'm not doing any actual magic, if I am going into ritual space, casting the circle, doing some sort of working, sharing the bread and wine, in, or whatever, nuts, fruit, etc. That process, I come out of it and I am more aware of what is around me. Psychically, I am able to receive and work with stuff. And that, for instance, as a software engineer, sometimes I'm faced with difficult problems, okay? And so the way I like to work is I visualize everything, okay? And I see how things go together. And if I do that, then I visualize the solution. Then I have to go back and establish the steps to get to that solution. But it is opening myself up to the possibilities. And that is something that I believe magic, witchcraft, and spells does as well or better than any other technique.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. The opening up to possibilities and taking away those mental blinders.
Right.
And sometimes can.
And in the process of doing that, it's really good for my, and I would say anybody's mental health, because a lot of times the problems that we have in the mental health department are because we don't see the possibilities and we don't recognize them as possibilities. And, I was married, the mother of my oldest daughter was regressive schizophrenic and, developed shortly after, about 9 months after Donnie was born. And she would hear the voices and all of this other stuff, but she got so wrapped up in that, she couldn't find her way out. As I understand it, now you know far better than I, that about 20% of the population has these sorts of symptoms. And this has been going on for as long as humankind, is what I understand. Okay?
Yes, it's true.
Now, at one point, these people were honored and became shamans, okay? And they were allowed to become spiritually sensitive. And they served the community. Now, we focus so much on treating the problems associated with mental illness. We don't really, nobody embraces the benefits. Is that makes sense?
It does make sense. And actually, there is a movement now called the Hearing Voices Network that is precisely about let's not stigmatize this anymore. Let's,
I am so glad to hear that.
yeah. As a matter of fact, one of my future interviews will be with the person who turned me on to that whole line of thinking, and she works at the hospital up here in Vancouver.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's called Hearing Voices Network, and we'll get into that again later in this series.
Wow.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that Susan, my ex, gets to see that.
okay. Well, I will make sure you get the link to HVN.
Yeah.
And I might even link it in at the end of this video, because now that it's mentioned, I hate to do that to people, to mention something and that throw a link out there. Because, you know, this will be a series of things that I want people to, you know, be able to come back to as a reference point as well. So this is part education, part archive.
Yes.
But I'm looking at the clock, and I don't want to straggle pull this out too long. But what the final comment question here, and this is the one you're going to kind of blow up, I'm sure, is what advice you have to people on the path, people who are baby pagans, who just now discovered that there's
yes.
that they have the freedom of thought that their parents didn't give them.
I would my advice for the baby pagans, or for any pagan for that matter, is explore as many traditions as you can. You know, some things will speak to you, some things won't. I have a lot of friends in OTO. Okay, I have a lot of friends in OTO. The OTO rituals are powerful.
And that's the Ordo Templi Orientis, for those who aren't paying attention here.
Aleister Crowley. Call me Crowley if you think I'm holy. Call me Crowley if you think I'm foul.
But you are not an OTOer.
I'm not an OTOer, because those rituals, although they're beautiful, they don't speak to me. They're not something I want to practice. And yet, and I will in the future go to them, okay? You know, I mean, I enjoy them. I incorporate those into my own experience. Another thing I would suggest for the baby pagans is whatever you've grown up with, take the wheat, leave the chaff. Take what is good is right for you, but you need to be freed from guilt. Okay, guilt is the soul killer, if you will. Guilt. So there's guilt that comes from, I feel guilt about the times I have hurt people. But I deal with that by going back and apologizing, even if I'm not forgiven, but apologizing. And if for whatever reason I can't apologize, try and do the opposite of what I did in the future when encountering the same situation.
Right.
You know, but guilt, you have to forgive yourself. And that applies on so many levels. And I don't believe you cannot be an effective magical being without releasing that guilt and releasing the condemnation, releasing the voices. You know, my father's thing where he would at least once a day call me a lazy good for nothing. And, you know, and so I countered that by overworking
Right.
and proving him wrong, which isn't healthy either.
No.
You've got to release all that, and it is a continual, lifelong process.
Ah,
Okay?
yes. Coming from a man who is in his 70s now.
Yeah. And so another thing for, learn new ritual, learn new magic. I would say avoid ever casting spells that the target of the spell hasn't given you permission to do.
Right. Consent is such a huge thing.
Consent. And it's got to be informed consent. You can't just trick them into saying it's okay.
Right.
Every religion, by the way, has its own spell work. In Christianity, we call it prayer. Okay? And there is intercessory prayer, there are prayers of praise, there are different types of prayers, just like there are different types of spells. Learn to recognize them. Be conscious. Another thing that I really important piece of advice is understand when you do a ritual, try to understand the meaning and the symbolism as much as you can. Study it. And so when you are in ritual, you can more easily visualize and make it real.
Yeah.
Is everybody is visualizing and making it real and seeing the guardians as well as sensing them. That makes it all the more powerful, and the power builds beyond just the efforts of those in your circle or of you individually.
Right. Well, I do have to wrap this up, and I think this is a fabulous interview, but
I love talking to you, Sam.
yeah, we are definitely going to have to find a fire to sit around in front of very soon, and get in our comfy chairs with our glass of whatever, and wait until the sun comes up while we chat.
I love that.
Oh, I miss it so much. This pandemic's almost over. We will get back to that.
Okay.
So thank you very much for your time, my friend, and have a lovely day. And I'm going to switch this back to the gallery view real fast. And my viewers will thank you and look forward to clicking on whatever links you want to recommend to me.
Yay! Well, I'll recommend a couple.
Okay, cool. And so that was Ron. And I think I have learned my lesson about doing early morning interviews. But I think that is also, he was very enlightening. And the links that we're going to add at the end of this one, some of which I will add because of the things we talked about in the interview, are not necessarily everything that he does. But it's what I could come up with for this series. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and please do subscribe. Take care.